Modern gaming in the AAA space is always about trying to make the biggest, most expansive, complex games that are taking longer and longer to make as time goes on, and costing more and more money to make, meaning that sequels and pre-established IPs are always considered the safe bet to make AAA games off, because when you have such a high budget and no room to fail, let's throw originality and creativity out the window. And one trend modern gaming wants to leave behind is turn-based combat. Apart from a few outliers, it seems like turn-based combat is becoming something of the past, something that's looked down upon by modern gaming audiences. It can turn a lot of people off a game altogether just by mentioning that it has turn-based combat. Why? Because why would anyone want to wait a turn in the middle of combat? How absurd. But call me old-fashioned and out of touch, but I really do love turn-based combat and wish we got more of it, because there's a complexity and satisfaction in turn-based combat that you would never be able to truly replicate in an action-based system. So the idea of turn-based combat going away truly doesn't sit right with me, because if done right, turn-based combat truly rivals any action game combat on the market. So let's address the elephant in the room. The biggest media franchise in the world is based on a turn-based JRPG where you collect monsters and battle with them. You might not have heard of it before. So how can the turn-based genre be on the way out? Well, Pokemon is very much the outlier when it comes to this. Pokemon has a stranglehold on the world and has become so much more than a video game franchise at this point. And even though the main series games are turn-based combat, they are very basic. And yeah, that can be expected from a children's game, but when most people believe that all turn-based games are as basic and simple as Pokemon is, which, may I add, this is no disrespect to Pokemon, as I'm a lifelong fan, I'm just willing to admit that the series is not really the best representation of what turn-based combat has to offer. So what does have the best turn-based combat to back up my point? That turn-based combat is great and should be here to stay. Well, there's a couple of examples, let me show you. Bravely Default is one of the shining examples of how turn-based combat, something that hasn't really changed a whole lot since its inception, can be modernised and given a whole new semblance of depth with the simple additions of the Brave and Default mechanic, which is a simple way to spice up battles, but is used very effectively, so much so that Bravely Default has 2 sequels that use the same mechanic to great success. So what is the Brave and Default mechanic that I'm talking about? Well, it's a simple risk and reward system. You can choose to attack like you normally would in any RPG, or you can choose to Brave or Default. Which is where, with Brave, you can attack us up to 3 times in one turn, which can be strategically done to finish an enemy off, but can also be used against you, if not taken proper advantage of, because in return for them extra turns that you have, you're giving up your future turns, meaning that the enemy can take full advantage of you. And then there's the Default, where you sacrifice a turn to then have the ability to go multiple times. These mechanics are, yes, very simple, but add so much complexity and strategy to a very simple system that I just jam with so much. Combat never feels boring in Bravely Default, because you're always thinking of when to hold back and when to take a risk. Sea of Stars came out last year and blew me away with how much I loved it. The pixel art was absolutely gorgeous and the music was beautiful, and the story, although not the deepest thing in the world, I think served its purpose well enough and is really overhated. But that wasn't the main appeal of the game to me. The main appeal was the gameplay. The gameplay is essentially a mix of Super Mario RPG and Chrono Trigger, where you have a party of 3 and your turn-based combat is all time-based, meaning that you don't just press a button and hope for the best. It's down to your timing to get the most out of the combat situation, and if you don't learn the timings of yours and the enemy's attacks, you'll be struggling to get through the game. So it's imperative that you learn. Like Bravely Default, the additions to the turn-based combat are not massively complex or groundbreaking, but that's the thing, they don't have to be. Sea of Stars makes turn-based combat exciting and engaging with its creativity of basic turn-based combat, arguably more than its inspirations. Now, I do believe there is a new king when it comes to turn-based combat, with behemoths like Final Fantasy looking like it's opting out of their turn-based roots with FF15 and FF16 becoming action combat games. And Dragon Quest, although extremely popular in Japan, doesn't seem to have captured the mass appeal that it has in Japan. So who is the new king of turn-based combat in my humble opinion? Well, you might not like it, but I truly do believe that it is Persona. Persona is a series that you absolutely love for a multitude of reasons, or you absolutely can't stand for a multitude of reasons. But one thing you can't argue is that the series has exploded in popularity in recent years, going from a relatively niche franchise to become one of the flagship of JRPGs, and that's thanks to the excellent combat system of Persona 5. Now, what makes Persona 5's combat so good? Why is it arguably the apex of turn-based combat? What new creative things does it do compared to other turn-based combat? Well, nothing really. Persona 5's combat is not drastically different to Persona 4's, but it's how it's refined and perfected. Persona 5 did the formula. It's got style, it's got substance, and most importantly, it's got speed. The biggest complaint you get against most turn-based combat is that it's slow. Well, Persona 5 took that personally and ramped up the speed considerably. Combat in Persona 5 is anything but slow. You're always on the move, always thinking, baton passing with teammates so you can carry on attacking and keeping the pace up. It's exhilarating and makes you forget at times you're even playing a turn-based game. That's how dynamic Persona 5's combat is. It's truly incredible. Turn-based combat is something that's never going to have the mass appeal nowadays. Most people won't even give it a chance. And that's a real shame because if done right, it is some of the most fun I've had while gaming. And honestly, seeing a project like Claire Obscure Expedition 33 makes me so happy because that looks absolutely incredible and could be the turn-based combat game that resonates with the mass audiences because it looks so cool. Here's hoping. So here's just my garbage opinions on why turn-based combat is absolutely amazing. So if you disagree, please let me know. If you watch to the end, please like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you again.